Let me also take a moment and just remind you that as I sit here and I ask you why you signed up, who you are and all these things, that as I already told you before, folks, you took the first step. You signed up for the class. And it's not cheap by any means, okay? It's not. And so if I were you, I would want to put 110% into actually studying the material, reviewing it, and making sure that you prepare yourself for the exam. Because if you do everything that you can on your end, I will do everything and then some on my end to help you be successful. I promise I will. It is very important for me to see you succeed. Now, that being said, folks, not all of you are going to pass this class, and that's just the honest to God truth. When it comes to the class, because people don't apply themselves, they don't have time, life gets in the way, as we said, the average pass rate, here's the downer, is about 50%, and that's across the board. I've taught for 4 different schools. It's about 50% in every single real estate classroom. There is 40 of you. 20 of you will make it, 20 of you will not, unless y'all surprise me statistically speaking. And right now, you can decide which 20 you are going to be in, because 40 of you could pass it. There is not a single thing stopping any of you, except yourself. So just keep that in mind as you go through this. The resources are there. I am here for you, and I will give you everything and anything you need. But just, know that it does take work. Now, here's the other motivational piece. If you haven't figured this out yet, I'm kind of cocky, both as an instructor and as a person, okay? I am one of those people that I've never studied for anything in my life. You could put any test in front of me throughout grade school, high school, and college, and I would pass it. Even if I never opened the book. I was one of those people. Now, just like I'm giving you the advice now, somebody gave me the advice as well, that you do not want to attempt that for this class because it will hurt your feelings. And so you know what I did at 24 or whatever I was at the time that 26, I don't remember how old I was. What is it, 9 years ago? I sat down at my dining room table and I put on my Beats headphones because I was cool, and I listened to, you ready for this, classical music. And I read my textbook and I took the quizzes, and then I went back and I read the textbook and I took the quizzes. I have never studied for anything in my life, but I knew I did not want to take this class more than once, and I didn't. I did ace everything on my first try, but folks, the person who had never studied for anything in his life up to the age of 25 or however old I was, I studied. Now, if you think you're smarter than me, you go right ahead, princess, all right? You think that you don't need to study? Give it a shot. I'll see you in the next class. Just being honest. Kirsten says, as a second timer, I'll definitely do things differently this time. If anyone wants advice, I'm here to chat about my previous experience. What I think, yeah, absolutely. I love that. Folks, it's a lot.
Hey, Seth, I got a question.
Yeah, what you got?
Are you going to, give us, I guess, key points on the main things to practice? Because I know it's a big, huge book, but is it going to be, main things that you recommend to practice the most at?
Oh, yeah. Here's the thing. I've taught this 1 or 1,000 times, and so I will tell you the most critical things from every single section. Now, Alex, I can promise you that's still not everything you need to know, but I know what kind of questions students struggle with. I know what kind of test topics are going to be thrown at you, and I can steer you in the right direction. But that doesn't mean that only listen to my voice and never read the supplemental stuff in the book, because even with the amount of detail I'm going to go into, it would be impossible for me to hit on everything even in 80 hours. But absolutely, I will guide you in the right section and the most important and testable things throughout every single section. Absolutely. Folks, that being said, I'll give you a couple extra minutes. It's 8:27. And so go take a break. Normally it'll be 8:30, but I'll give you a couple extra minutes. Come back at 8:40. Then we'll be in the home stretch for the night, and I want to talk about the licensing process, kind of what to expect to get through the rest of the night. So y'all come back at 8:40. Make sure you're back on time, and we'll keep on keeping on. Whoop, whoop. So let's get into a little more of the nitty-gritty stuff. Now, folks, this slide right here is just reiterating that because there's a lot of information going to get thrown at you, and you have a tendency to forget this. So there are 2 sets of exams. There is the class exam, which is 2 parts, and then there is the state exam, which is 2 parts. Now, I will tell you, this is technically a typo, and I'll show you what I mean. I was thinking that this was the different slide, and so I removed the 0.5. On the state licensing exam, you get 2.5 hours on their national portion and 2 hours on their state portion. In the class, it's 2 and 2. Nobody ever uses all 2 and 2. So that's the way it's done like that. We already did introductions. This is just a lot of things to be aware of. Now this right here, let me give you a quick little insight. I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you that syllabus and explain that more in just a bit of detail. But when you look at the syllabus that I'm about to bring back up, they have things categorized into level 1, level 2, and level 3. It's basically a condensed version of what is referred to as Bloom's taxonomy, which is how you could basically hierarchically rank what you need to know. And so if we're dealing with level 1, level 1 is basically know what it is. Okay, flashcard level vocab. Know what it is, be able to say, yep, that's that thing. Recall it, make sure you understand it. Level 2 is you need to be able to understand it to the extent that you can differentiate it between other concepts or link it to similar concepts or flow of events or ideas. So basically being able to apply it in a practical manner. And then level 3, for all intents and purposes, is you better be able to write a book on it. And of course, the most difficult subjects from a testable point of view are level 3s. You will hear me in a lot of sections say, though, this is level 1. This is vocab. You need to know what this is. So you will just hear me say that, right? Level 1, level 2, level 3. And you'll see that in the syllabus as well. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Let's talk about the RELINC book. Now, folks, there is a couple slides that go into this, but at this point, I'm just going to show it to you. So there's 2 ways for you to access the RELINC book. RELINC is an abbreviation for Real Estate Licensing in North Carolina. So going back to the online program, under the Getting Started, and then Important Course Documents, there is your RELINC book. Actually, let me move it around because I think since I'm on the back end, it may be different than the one you're seeing. If it is, I'll change it. But let me show you the other place that I want you to be aware of to see this. You will need to get familiar with the Real Estate Commission's website. And that is ncrec.gov. It is a government entity. So ncrec.gov. This is the North Carolina Real Estate Commission's website that we are currently on. You can always access the RELINC book here, where I'm about to show you. And I'm also going to make you watch a video. Okay, this is just an introduction video of what the licensing process looks like. As long as it's still there, they've been updating some of these videos. So when you get to the point of trying to fill out your application, the way that you do that is you go under licensing and apply for a broker's license, which will take you to this page right here. Now, the RELINC book that I'm going to look at in just a second, application booklet, Real Estate Licensing in North Carolina, is right there under licensing as well. That's the easiest way to find it. So I'm going to let you watch this little video on the licensing process, and that's where we'll probably spend the rest of the night, is just talking about some basic terminology that is testable, understanding how the process works, making sure you know how to access these different materials. Most entertaining video in any way, shape, and form. And I'll tell you one other thing to be aware of. They used to have an actor who did all these videos, but they've changed a lot of laws and rules, and so they've updated them, and they, if you couldn't tell, are using like some of those AI programs, and they're super weird. Did you notice like some of his like facial movements? Like he would just like say something and be like, you know, he would just like purses, like that's not the right time for that. Stop it, you weird, creepy computer guy. Here's the thing, folks. You probably didn't catch a whole lot from that video, but you can go back and watch it anytime on this website. But I do want us to spend some time tonight in this RELINC book, okay? And as I said, this is Real Estate Licensing in North Carolina. Now, here's what this book is. It is a guide on how to apply for a license. And so the class is one piece of it. And then, of course, you have to finish your application. It talked about a background check. And so that's exactly what this is just all the information that you would potentially need to know about the actual application process. I'm not going to say that this book is not testable, but anything that could be testable in this book will be located elsewhere. That's what I'll say. So I'm not going to read this to you. You all are very capable of reading. I have not a doubt in my mind, but I'm going to point out a couple pieces. Let me just zoom in a little bit here. As you kind of go through this, Can I close this? Is that going to change anything? Yeah, cool. So as I said, real estate licensing in North Carolina kind of explains using the book here. Introduction, license categories and status levels, qualification requirements, the application process, consideration of applicant's character, the license exam, applying for and scheduling an examination, and a couple other pieces. So as you get into it, here is kind of a list of different statuses here. Now, folks, I want to point out something to you, okay? Let me give you your first introduction as to why this class is very difficult. Just one of the reasons why this class is very difficult. You all, for various reasons, as we've already discussed, decided to get a license. So you can become somebody who assists people in buying and selling houses, potentially, or managing properties or whatever. So here's my question to you. What do you call those people? What's your name for them? What do we call them out there on the streets? The mean streets out there, what do we call the people that help people?
Real estate agents?
Broker.
Real estate agents? Broker?
Broker.
Broker? Is it any other names you've heard?
Realtors.
Realtors? Realtors, yeah. Folks, let's talk about this for a second. Out on them streets, they call us real estate agents, they call us brokers, and they call us realtors. They sure do. Now, here's the epiphany to have tonight. Those are not the same thing. And sometimes when I say that, people clinch up a little bit. They're like, am I in the right place? Is this not the right class I need to be in? Let me explain. Okay, let me explain. A broker, well, folks, have you ever heard the term broker used anywhere else other than real estate? Mm-hmm.
What? Stockbroker?
Yeah.
Broker.
There you go.
I work for a logistics broker.
There you go.
Yeah, I was a logistics broker.
That's wow. So there you go. We got stockbroker, logistics broker. We got mortgage broker, insurance broker. Can we all agree we've heard that term broker used elsewhere? So anybody know what the word broker in and of itself means?
In North Carolina, licensing.
Well, it's not enough. That's too specific.
Alec.
So like someone pays you to do a service for somebody else. Like you're a third party, basically.
Yeah, that's the way I put it.
Who buys and sells goods.
Yeah, so a broker, folks, is just somebody who facilitates a deal between other people. Because as a real estate broker that I currently am, I'm not the one buying the houses. I'm not the one selling the houses. I'm working with sellers and I'm working with buyers and I'm facilitating a deal. That's what a broker does. So if you are a mortgage broker, you're not a lender. You're bringing together banks that want to lend money and people that want to borrow money. So you're a mortgage broker. If you're a real estate broker, you're bringing together people who want to sell real estate and people who want to buy real estate. You're bringing together people who want to rent out their houses and people who want to rent houses. So on and so forth, right? We can all agree that's all a broker is. Somebody who brings together two parties to facilitate a deal. That makes sense? So you are all endeavoring to get a real estate broker's license, which allows you to legally and lawfully broker real estate transactions. That's the whole point. Now, let's introduce the other terms. Real estate agent. Agent means you represent somebody. Can we all agree celebrities have agents? Right? They have somebody representing them. Sports players, right? On team sports, they have agents. There's a lot insurance agents. There's a lot of different agents out there. So when we say real estate agent, it's somebody who represents somebody else's well-being in a real estate transaction. So yes, you will technically be both a real estate agent and a real estate broker, but you're quite literally only referred to as an agent because you're representing the well-being of somebody. You're referred to as a broker because you have a broker's license. You got a question, Alex? Yeah.
Is wholesaling? Do you need any type of license to just do wholesaling? Because wholesaling is basically a broker, but you're not using any kind of capital to actually buy or sell some piece of property.
Yeah. So let me answer that question real quick, folks. There are about 10 billion people who are gurus news of something on TikTok or other social media that will try to teach you about 10,000 get-rich schemes, and one of those is wholesaling. And so the context that I'm sure you're referring to, Alex, the most common version of wholesaling is when you basically get under contract to buy a house, let's say for $100,000, and, you know, it could be fixed and flipped and sold for, you know, $300,000 if you put some work into it. Well, some people will not have any desire to actually fix that house, but they get under contract. They will turn around and they'll find somebody who does want to buy that house and fix and flip it. And so they will basically sell them the contract for $20,000, right? They say, hey, I got a contract to buy this house for $100,000. You give me $20,000, I'll let you have the contract. And then they will buy it and then fix it and flip it. That is the most common iteration of wholesaling. To answer your question, Alex, some states have passed legislation that states that you do have to have a broker's license to do wholesaling. North Carolina has not passed that legislation yet. However, please understand that wholesaling typically involves illegal brokerage activity. And so more often than not, anybody who attempts wholesaling in North Carolina could be subject to criminal prosecution from the Real Estate Commission and the Attorney General of North Carolina if they cross that line. So there you go. There's your short answer. The short, air quotes, right? Short answer. A little bit longer than a short answer, but I gave you the point. And that'll kind of make some more sense as we get into this. Now, folks, let's talk about the last name, okay? An agent is somebody who represents people. A broker is somebody who brings together two parties. Let's talk about that other one that you know, realtor, okay? First and foremost, look at me, okay? Let's just right here, eye contact. Folks, it is, in fact, realtor. Okay, I know some of us are from the South, and we're all tempted to put extra syllables in there that don't belong, okay? It is not, in fact, a realtor. It's not a realtor. None of that. You know why? When you get sick, you don't go see a doctor, do you? You go to the doctor. It is a realtor. Now that I've made my point, just understand that that's the correct way to say it. If you add any extra syllables in there, you do you, boo-boo. I'm going to judge you silently, but now that you know the truth, okay? So let me tell you a realtor. A realtor is a broker who has joined a voluntary trade organization. I'll give you air quotes again for voluntary, but that's a story for a different time. So you are only called a realtor if you have joined this private club, basically. You got to pay to join it, and it gives you access to certain resources. And of course, it is also a big topic of conversation in legal aspects right now. But once again, that's for another story as well. So just keep that in mind. So there's introduction number one. Some of the things you know, folks, you don't actually know. You think you know. And so let me give you a really big piece of advice right now. Look at me. Throughout this class, those of you who have purchased real estate, have friends, maybe family that are real estate agents or have some relation to real estate, you need to disconnect from that right now. Because there is a big difference between the laws, the rules, and the testing versus the real world. Okay, there really is. Some of the things that you think you know will screw you up on a test. Let me give you one more example of this before we go any deeper. And those of you who have already taken the class, don't spoil it, okay? You just sit there and stare at me. But the rest of you who haven't taken this class, what is a mortgage?
It's a note.
It's a note?
Basically, the bank saying that they're comfortable with you looking at your financial background, and they'll actually give you a loan.
Give you a loan? Okay. And
Isn't it more of a promise?
it's a promise?
And you don't technically own anything until you pay it off. It's on both.
No, now you're getting into the I've taken this class before territory.
Oh, yeah.
Say it again.
Agreement.
An agreement?
A mortgage is a bank. They take out a mortgage on your property and they list it as a deed of trust against the deed of your property.
Mm-hmm. Let me tell you the reason why I asked this question, folks. If you own a home, 99% of people who own a home each month say, I've got to make my mortgage payment. That's what they say. So a lot of people think that the monthly payment is their mortgage. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And so a lot of you said a lot of different things. Now, of course, I will teach you the technical aspect in the financing section, but mortgage is not the money. The mortgage is also not the promissory note. It's also not the agreement to borrow the money. The mortgage is an actual security instrument that pledges your home as collateral for the debt that you own. Now, here's the other surprising thing, folks. We don't even use mortgages in North Carolina. So every single one of you who owns a house, who may have known that it was a security instrument, you don't have a mortgage. Mortgages do not exist in North Carolina. Mortgage and deed of trust are two different security instruments in the same realm, the same category, but it is very dependent on the state. You see how confusing that gets? Because what you thought you knew is not correct sometimes. So you've got to disconnect. Do not think about, listen to me. Do not think about what your agent said, what your agent did, what it was like when you bought your house. If you get into that territory, let me give you one more piece of advice too. Don't you ever answer a question with emotion. If you're ever like, well, that doesn't seem fair, I don't like that, tough cookies. It's not about what you like. You answer the test questions with what comes out of my mouth. You understand me? Everybody understand that? Because there are things that are going to hurt your feelings and you're not going to like them, but don't ever answer the question that way. You're always going to be like, well, that's not what my agent did. Don't answer the question that way. That being said, you can always ask me questions, but if you go too rabbit holey on me, I'm going to say, boop, boop. We're not talking about that, right? Sometimes I just have to stop the conversation because otherwise it's going to go down a rabbit hole. And listen, as much as it pains me to say this as an educator, my job is to teach you to pass a test. It pains me to say that, but that's my job right now. I'll teach you how to be a successful real estate agent later. It's called post-licensing. Your job right now is to pass a test. Everybody with me? So let me tell you why I introduced that concept, okay? When we get into some of the actual verbiage that you need to know for your test, broker, agent, realtor, yeah, they can all be tested, but let's take a deeper dive into the word broker and kind of differentiate, one of the concepts between national and state. Folks, North Carolina is what we call a broker-only state. So every single person who gets a license in North Carolina is some iteration of a broker. You start out in North Carolina as what we call a provisional broker. The slang I like to use is a baby broker. Well, there's also a status called a broker. And yet again, let me give you an example of why this class can really screw you up. A broker can also be tested as a full broker. It can also be tested as a non-provisional broker. That one status has 3 different names. We've got a lot of AKAs in this class. Everybody with me? Then there is something in North Carolina called a broker in charge, called a BIC for short. And then there is a status called broker in charge eligible, or BIC eligible for short. Now let me give you kind of a little bit of a comparison here between this and a national point of view. North Carolina used to be, and some states still are, not broker-only states. And so in some states, when you get your license, you are actually getting what's called a salesperson's license. A salesperson always has to be supervised by a broker in states that have salespeople. We don't have salespeople anymore. But a provisional broker, sometimes called a PB for short, is basically the equivalent of a salesperson. They have to have somebody supervising them in order to be able to transact business. So we're going to talk more about these statuses as time goes on. This is just kind of an introduction to some of this language. Now, how do you become a provisional broker in North Carolina? This class. When you pass this class, and then you pass the state licensing exam, and you finish the application, and you have the requisite character, you'll be issued a license. It is a broker's license, but it is on a status that is called provisional status. So you're a provisional broker, and it's also issued on what we call inactive status, meaning you can't use it yet. So that's what this is showing you. How do you get here? This class, pass the exam, do the background check. How do you move from provisional to full broker? It's called post-licensing. Sorry, folks, there is more education after pre-licensing. But you have a period of time. It's 18 months from the time you get your license, or a year and a half, to get your post-licensing done. You never have to go beyond this step. broker in charge and broker in charge eligible are voluntary. And we're going to talk more about those in the introductory section. So back to the RELINC book, it kind of tells you about the different statuses. Now, provisional status, folks, hear me out here. This is very testable. Okay, so that's why I told you this book that we're looking at, not part of your test, but certain information within it they could test you on, like how do you become a provisional broker, like how long do you have to take your post licensing, like what's your status, is it active or is it inactive? So you will see all this elsewhere, but this is kind of an introduction to the education within this application booklet. So a provisional broker is where you will start in North Carolina when you go through this program and you get your license issued after taking the state licensing exam. You cannot use that license unless you have supervision. So you have to affiliate with a broker in charge and or a firm in order to activate your license as a provisional broker. After you take your 3 post-licensing courses, which are 30 hours each, you will move from provisional broker to full broker. Now, folks, let me explain something. These are the kind of test questions that'll screw you up. It'll basically say something like, which of the following would be a true statement about a full broker in North Carolina? And one of the options is going to be, it's when a provisional broker affiliates with a broker in charge, they become a full broker. No, they don't. That makes them active, but they're still provisional. The only thing that is required to move from provisional to full broker is 3 30-hour post-licensing courses. And if folks don't panic, this is not the full teaching of this. I'm just kind of showing you right off the bat how confusing some of this language is, how confusing and similar some of these topics are. So provisional broker is where you will all start. If you want to keep your license playing, folks, think of provisional broker as training wheels. You can't do anything without supervision. Just like you wouldn't put a kid on training wheels and say, go drive in the highway. Okay, somebody's got to watch you. Once you remove those training wheels, you're called a broker. A broker can operate independently. Now, they can't do everything in North Carolina, but they can operate independently. Broker in charge is basically the equivalent of a managing broker. Other states only have 2 tiers. Not all other states, but some states. Just have salesperson and broker. So this is how this all gets kind of confusing. Now, folks, let me ask you a question. Okay, this will help you kind of understand this. Every single one of you in here is endeavoring to get a real estate license. Okay, here's my question for you. If you own a house right now as we're sitting here speaking, do you need a license to sell your own house?
No.
No. If you want to go out and buy a house tomorrow, do you have to have a license to buy a house tomorrow?
No.
No. Do you have to have an agent to buy a house?
Yes.
No.
Not for yourself.
Not for yourself. What about this? If you own a rental property, right? Who was it? Teray. She inherited some rental properties, right? Do you have to have a license to manage your own rental properties, folks?
No.
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 And so let me explain why you need a license. Folks, when you are doing things for yourself, that's not brokerage activity. Because I already told you a broker brings together 2 parties. If you're doing it for yourself, you're not bringing together 2 parties. You are a party. Does that make sense? And so there are certain times you need a license and other times you wouldn't. That is going to be a very testable concept throughout this class. And so here's the criteria for when you need a license, okay? Now, don't panic. You don't need to write this down. It's going to be on my slides very soon when we get into that. But I'm just kind of introducing you, ripping the Band-Aid, as they say. If you are doing any of the select brokerage activities, and we have a fun little acronym for the brokerage activities, and that is LL Beans. Just like the clothing store, but with an S on the end. LL Beans. And that is list, lease, buy, exchange, auction, negotiate, sell. I'm telling you, there's going to be a slide for it. Don't panic. If you do any of those things, offer to do any of those things, refer somebody to do any of those things, and it involves real property or real estate. Let's just use the word real estate right now because you're more familiar with that word. Real estate for somebody other than yourself, and you're getting paid to do it. A license is required. You need a license. That's what it comes down to. So I asked you, do you need a license to sell your own house? No. Why not? Because it's not for others. Is it real estate? Yes. Are you making money? Yes. Is it for somebody other than yourself? No. If all three of those things are present, you need a license in North Carolina. If even one is missing, you do not need a license. Let me show you what I mean. You could manage your grandmother's property right now for free because you love your sweet Nana and you don't need a license. It's real property. It's for Nana, that's not you. Keyword was for free. You didn't get paid for it, you didn't need a license. All three things have to be present for a license to be legally required in North Carolina. Does that make sense? Now, folks, there is no ifs, ands, buts, or coconuts. Let me say that right now. You manage Nana's properties for Nana, and Nana gives you $1 in exchange. Folks, you just did illegal brokerage activity. It does not matter how small that money is. That is extremely testable to understand because it is real estate for Nana, somebody other than you, and you got $1. Folks, it's compensation. You needed a license. And so a license allows me currently to facilitate deals between parties and get paid legally. So anybody who wants to get paid for brokerage activities, or should I say anything that wants to get paid for brokerage activities, has to have a license. Let me tell you why I just said that. We're going to talk more about these general statuses and make sure you understand these, but I want to point out this right here. A firm license. Well, folks, have you ever heard of Keller Williams, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, EXP, Remax? You ever heard of those names? Well, folks, those are businesses. That means they've created an entity with the Secretary of State, and they do real estate, don't they? Do you think these businesses are collecting money for assisting people with real property, and these properties are not theirs? Folks, the way that the laws and rules are written in North Carolina is you have to have a license as a person, a people, a broker, but an entity, a business would also have a license to be able to be paid for brokerage activity. So that is what we call a firm license, okay? You only need a firm license for an entity. Limited liability company, corporation, partnership, something like that. Now I'm going to provide some clarity. Sole proprietorship is not a business. We'll talk about that later. It's not an entity, should I say. So there is these special categories, okay? Firm license is for an entity. And then there's also this special category. It's called an LNCL, or a limited non-resident commercial license. Here's the short of this, and we'll talk more about this later as well. Somebody who's licensed in another state can get this if they want to transact commercial brokerage only, as long as they fill out some special paperwork. So it's for non-resident brokers. None of you can get this because you live in North Carolina. So this is for people who are licensed in another state. Special category, can appear on the test. But of course, these other categories that we'll get more in depth into later are going to be the most testable. So this just really outlines the licensing process, the requirements. Folks, think of it this way. It's basically the same as this class. 18, sane, and sober. Now for this class, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I'm just kidding. All 3. But legal in the United States, 18. The education is this 75. It's actually 80 hours because we give you some extra to make sure you got enough. But this class, passing it, is the education requirement. Of course, if you're licensed in another state, there is potential equivalency education requirements. Most of you won't need to ever worry about that. Here's where it talks about the application process. Here's where it talks about time frames. It talks about the fees, folks. When you get done with this class and you pass it, there is the $100 application for your license, and then there is an additional fee for the test. Now, I believe when they changed it, it's like 56 or 60. I can't remember the exact number. It's going to say it in here. But when I told you when you retake any portion of the test, they make you pay both again. So it's like the 100 and whatever all over. Here's one thing to be aware of, folks. If you didn't catch it in this video, you have to have what's called the requisite character to get your license in North Carolina. That means that you cannot be, under most circumstances, a felon or a terrible person. Now, I'm not saying that, it'll bar you, but please be aware you do have to complete a background check to get your license. And it is exceptionally thorough. I have had multiple students have to go to a character hearing with the commission before they had their license issued. If you got anything, as you're sitting here and you're like, oh, if you're feeling any kind of way about this conversation right now, if you go back to the Real Estate Commission's website where I showed you can apply for a license, there is this link right here. It is called a petition for predetermination. This is basically where you reach out to the commission. You say, hey, I have X on my record. Is that going to prevent me from getting a license? Now, they're not going to guarantee it, but they will basically say, yes, go ahead and take the class and we'll have a discussion with you at that point. Or they'll say, no, don't waste your time. So you got anything that you're not sure about, as opposed to going through the entire class only to be told no, you may want to reach out and get some insight beforehand. So that is where you would go. It does talk about the requisite character right here. Also talks about the hearings. Now, folks, the background checks, I recommend doing those about, this is a night class, I would say with like 3 weeks left in the class is a good time to do it. They've been on average taking about 10 days to come back. Now, that's also assuming that your background is pretty straightforward. If you've lived in 17 countries in 32 states and you've been in the military, buckle up, buttercup. It's going to take a hot minute. The more expansive it is, the more it costs and the longer it's going to take. I've had students where it cost $10 and came back in 2 days. I've had students where it cost $360 and came back in 3 months. So go ahead and mentally prepare right now for how complex your background is. The average person, 3 weeks before the end of class. Now, here's the thing. They're only good for 6 months. So let's say that you apply for it halfway through the class and you don't pass the class and you've already done the background check. And then a couple months later, you sign up for the class again and that 6 months is now elapsed. It's no good anymore. You'd have to do another one, have to pay the money again. So kind of keep that in mind. And then this is the only appropriate place to go for the background check. You cannot order a third-party one. It has to be through their resources. So you can find the information under the application section if you start that, where you come down under apply online. But then you can also just go right here in this link, this RELINC book, as I showed you on the Real Estate Commission's website. Everybody still following along with me so far? Nobody lost yet, right? Still kind of just the beginning. This is stuff you need to know. Stuff. Talks about the different character pieces, the application, some dates, the petition for predetermination. Here's where it talks about the exam, talks about Pearson VUE, talks about how the test is structured. Here's one thing that I'm going to break to you, because I don't know if it's in here or not, but I just want you to know this. With Pearson VUE, they do what is called a scaled exam. We're not going to spend a long time talking about this, but let me give you just a little bit of insight as to what a scaled exam means for Pearson VUE. They have decided that as much as they try, not every test is identical, because we can all agree there are some questions that are just harder than others. And so there is basically a rating system on the difficulty level of a test. And so it is not purely, oh, I got 60 out of 80 right. It's how many did you get right based on how difficult the exam was. I don't know anything beyond that. That's all I know. But you could potentially get less right than somebody else and pass, and then they didn't because they had an easier exam than you did. At the end of the day, you have to make a 75 on their scaled score. And as I told you, the students who have made it through our program, they're at 100%, knock on wood, so far for passing this Pearson VUE exam. Okay, so just nobody panic. I just want to give you all the facts here. Also, I'm going to say this because a lot of people get confused on this too. This class is good for 3 years. If you successfully pass it and complete it, and I say, yep, you pass and you get, the exam code, this class is good for 3 years. However, once you take this class and you go and apply to, get your license, that opens up a 180-day exam eligibility window that you have to pass the state licensing exam in. And so let's say that you passed one section of theirs you would only have to retake the one, but you have to get it done in that window. If you do not pass both in that window, it will reset. You have to open a new 180-day exam eligibility window, and then you have to, continue taking both until you finally pass it. So just keep that in mind. Somebody also asked earlier, if you do get to that portion of the state exam, you can only retake it every 10 days. It's not something where you can take it tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day. Folks, put it in perspective here. It's about $160 a pop. If you have to take that exam 10 times, that's a chunk of change, isn't it, folks? Just make sure you're prepared before you go take it, okay? Here's where I want to give you another really important piece of insight. All right, this is going to get a little personal here. And the reason I'm doing this is because we're almost at the end. What I like to do, folks, is I always like to leave the last 10 minutes of class for you to just talk to me. So I got 7 minutes, and then I'll just open it up for you to talk to me for the last 10 minutes. But here's the personal piece, folks. We've got scores that we get as instructors and as a school. And our scores are based on you going and taking your state licensing exam within 30 days of finishing your class. And so if you pass both, I get a pass. If you fail one, I get a fail. And so they really hold us to a fire on these pass rates. Now, knock on wood, my schools and mine are phenomenal as they sit. But I'm a very proud man, and I'm very cocky, as I said before. Now listen to me, okay? I told you that I'm going to do everything in my power to help you pass your exam. So here's my one big ask. If you pass my class and you're prepared and you put in the work, go take the exam and pass it. Make me look good. But if you didn't put in the work and you got lucky on my exam and you're not prepared, you better hold off slick. Because listen, the commission may let you retake it. But if I find out that you took it within 30 days and hurt my numbers, you ever seen those horror movies where it's like storming outside and it's like pitch black and you're going to see the rain coming down and the lightning's going to flash and you're just going to see my silhouette standing under a lamppost whenever the lightning flashes? And you're like, was that Seth standing out there? But when the light flashes again, I'm going to be gone. And I'm going to show up behind you and I'm going to be like, so I heard about your exam. And then you're just going to go, ah! And then the lights are going to go dark and then nobody's going to ever see you again. I don't know where you're going to be, right? But then like no one's going to ever see. Again, like that's going to be it. I'm kidding. This is it. For legal purposes, this is all a joke. Okay? But do make sure that you are well prepared for passing the exam because I like to win. And I promise I will do anything I can to help you. So just keep that in mind. Now, folks, if you wait on day 31 after you pass your class and you have no idea what's going on, do it to it, prove it. Okay? It doesn't affect me. It's 30 days after your class ends, meaning the day that you pass your test. So just keep that in mind. Here's where it talks about the exam fees. $100 application fee, $60 for the exam. Here's the yay for you piece. It does drop by $10 if you're only retaking one. So still $150 a pop for retaking just one section instead of $160. There's the numbers we were looking for. Here's just some examples of what the test questions. Folks, please be aware that there is no essay questions. Okay, none of that. It's all multiple choice, 4 answers. That's how they're all structured. My tests, these tests as well. So it just gives you some examples. This is one of the big changes, okay? Especially if you took the course before really January of this year. The old RELINC book had a very, very different test structure. And so now you can see the categories. And so here's where I'll kind of go off on 2 little tangents in the 4 minutes I have before I open the floor for you. The syllabus that is in the online program is the syllabus I want you to focus on. Okay, it is the way that the material flows. It is the way that I'm going to be teaching it. It is how we've always taught it, and it is all the testable things. There is another syllabus that I will share with you at the beginning of class tomorrow, and I'll tell you why there's a new syllabus. What they basically did is when the test provider changed, they recategorized all these topics to show you what could be tested in each section. Does it make any sense from a teaching flow point of view? No. And in fact, some of the concepts are duplicated, right? So you could see like some agency contract stuff in the agency section and the contract section. So I will share a different syllabus with you. The new syllabus lines up with these testing categories. That's the only thing it's good for, is knowing what information could be in each section. It's the same information, it's just grouped for test purposes. So if you go to like the state section of agency, you will just see in this new syllabus a smattering of different stuff you could see in that testable section. Does that make sense for everybody? Even though the commission themselves said, don't teach from this new one because the flow makes no sense. But if you are curious as to what's being tested in each section, that's what the 2024 syllabus is good for. I know, it's confusing. Listen, don't shoot the messenger. I don't work for the commission. I'm just a humble instructor trying to get you to pass. You got a lot of wheels turning up there. But it's all good things. So that's really the bulk of what I'm going to show you in the RELINC book. Just like I said, 80 questions on the national, 60 on the state. Actually, it's 85 and 65. They add in what we call pre-test questions where they're testing to see if they're good questions or not. Those do not get graded. They do not count against you, and they do not use your allotted time. So if you actually sit there and count your questions, yeah, it's going to be 85 and 65. Not on mine, on theirs. Passing score is 75, as I said. Some different materials and videos. So that's really all I wanted to show you from the RELINC book, folks. You will basically forget this exists until you pass the class. Let's just be honest. Aside from the background check, most of you are just going to be so focused on how do I pass this class that you're going to forget about the license application process until like you think you're going to pass it. But this is how you go back to it. So remember, Real Estate Commission's website, licensing, RELINC book. And then I'll double check to make sure that it's the most up-to-date one in your online program as well. And then I'll share the other syllabus with you. Which basically wraps up the introduction to the course, which means tomorrow night we will get into actual learning material, which will be the section that we really start talking about those licensing categories. So let me show you this one more time. This right here. Aside from the way that this flows in the online system, you will get basically the license categories added in. Even though it's not in here, your first row category is real estate, basic real estate concepts. Well, because it's such an important and testable concept, I always start you with the licensing categories. So I've just kind of grouped those in the RELINC book. So it's kind of grouped in here. And then we'll circle back around to the other stuff. But tomorrow, that's where we'll get. So, last 10 minutes of class, folks. Whatever y'all want to talk about. Anything I said that